My sister drugged my coffee and stole my husband, but she had no idea what I really knew. The security alert on my phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m., jolting me awake in my king-sized bed. Motion detected in kitchen. Someone was in my house. My name is Sarah Matthews. I'm 38 years old, and I've built Matthews Interior Design from absolutely nothing into Nashville's most exclusive firm, with clients including country music stars and Fortune 500 executives. Right now, I'm sitting in my silver Tesla Model S outside the downtown Hermitage Hotel, watching through tinted windows as my perfectly constructed world implodes in real time. My husband David told me he was in Chicago closing a major commercial real estate deal. Emergency meeting with international investors, he said. Potential 7-figure commission that would set us up for life. He even sent me photos of O'Hare Airport and his suite at the Four Seasons, to prove it complete with timestamps and background details that seemed authentic. But the GPS tracker I'd secretly installed in his phone 3 weeks ago, after noticing strange inconsistencies in his stories, told a very different story. He'd never left Tennessee. In fact, his phone had been pinging from various locations around Nashville all week, including this very hotel where I now sat. I adjusted my designer sunglasses and walked through the Hermitage Hotel's opulent lobby, my Jimmy Choo heels clicking against the imported Italian marble floor with calculated precision. The elevator ride to the penthouse level felt like ascending to witness my own execu. Tie in each floor that passed, bringing me closer to whatever devastating truth awaited. The door to Suite 1205 was slightly ajar, voices drifting out into the hallway. I positioned myself behind the large marble column near the entrance and peered carefully around the edge, my heart pounding so hard I was certain it could be heard throughout the entire floor. David stood there in an expensive charcoal Armani suit I'd never seen before, one that must have cost at least $5,000, holding hands with a woman in an exquisite ivory wedding dress that I immediately recognized as Vera Wang's latest collection. Not just any woman, my younger sister Emma. The same Emma I'd raised since she was 14 after our parents died in a horrific car crash on Interstate 40. The same Emma whose full college tuition at Vanderbilt I'd paid without question, whose first apartment I'd helped furnish with pieces from my own collection, whose broken heart I'd mended through 3 failed relationships with men who didn't deserve her. The same Emma who called me every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m. to chat about her day, who spent every Sunday at my house for family dinner, who I trusted more than anyone else in the world. Do you, David Michael Patterson, take Emma Catherine Matthews to be your lawfully wed dead wife in sickness and in health for richer or poorer till death? Do you part? The officiant's words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. They were getting married. My husband of 12 years and the sister I'd sacrificed everything for were standing in a luxury hotel suite exchanging vows while I was supposed to be asleep in the home we'd built together. I do, David said, his voice filled with emotion I'd rarely heard directed toward me in recent years. I do, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face as she gazed up at him with complete adoration. You may kiss the bride. I watched in horror as my husband kissed my sister with the passion he'd once reserved for me, their bodies pressed together in a moment of pure intimacy, while a small group of witnesses applauded. I recognized some of the faces, David's business partners, Emma's co-workers from the marketing firm, where she worked, even my own neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who'd always claimed to love me like a daughter. I don't remember how I left the hotel or made it back to my car, only that I somehow found myself driving through the empty Nashville streets at 3 a.m, tears streaming down my face as I navigated back to our Belmead mansion, the one that had been toured in Southern Living magazine as Tennessee's most beautiful home, just 6 months earlier. I poured myself a generous glass of Macallan 25-year-old Scotch, the bottle David had been saving for our 15th wedding anniversary next year. The liquid burned going down, but not nearly as much as the betrayal that was consuming me from the inside out. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Deal's going great, sweetheart. These international investors are demanding, but I think we'll close by tomorrow. Might be here through the weekend, though. Missing you terribly. Can't wait to celebrate when I get home. The lies came so easily to him, so naturally, that I wondered how long he'd been deceiving me about other things. How many business trips had been fabricated? How many late nights at the office had actually been spent with Emma? Another buzz, this time from an unknown number. Now you know the truth about your perfect marriage and perfect family. But this is just the beginning. Check your home security footage from last Tuesday morning. You'll want to see what your loving sister put in your coffee. My blood ran cold. Last Tuesday morning, I'd felt violently ill after drinking my usual coffee, spending the entire day in bed with what I'd assumed was a stomach virus or food poisoning. The symptoms had been severe: nausea, dizziness, blurred vision, and a rapid heartbeat that had concerned me enough to consider calling my doctor. I rushed to my home office and logged into our comprehensive security system, something I'd installed 2 years ago after a series of break-ins in our neighborhood had left me feeling vulnerable when David traveled for work. The system recorded everything: interior and exterior cameras with audio motion sensors, even air quality monitoring. I scrolled back to last Tuesday, watching the footage at double speed until I found what I was looking for. There was Emma alone in my kitchen at 6:45 a.m., 30 minutes before I typed. Callie came downstairs. She moved with purpose, opening cabinets until she found my favorite coffee mug, the handmade ceramic piece I'd bought during our honeymoon in Italy. But instead of preparing coffee, Emma pulled a small glass vial from her purse. She carefully opened it and poured a clear liquid into my mug, swirling it around to ensure it mixed completely. Then she prepared my coffee exactly the way I liked it: 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and left it on the counter where I'd find it when I came down for breakfast. She'd poisoned me. My own sister, the girl I'd loved and protected and provided for, had deliberately put something harmful in my coffee. The realization hit me like a physical blow, doubling me over as I struggled to process what I'd just witnessed. I spent the rest of the night going through security footage from the past 6 months, fast-forwarding through weeks of mundane daily activities to look for other suspicious behavior. What I found was a pattern of deception that made my stomach turn. Emma had been coming to my house regularly when I wasn't home, using the spare key I'd given her for emergencies. She'd been in David's office photographing documents with her phone. She'd been in our bedroom going through my jewelry and taking pictures of my most valuable pieces. She'd been in my home office accessing my computer when I'd apparently forgotten to log out. But most disturbing of all, she'd been meeting with David in our house on multiple occasions when he was supposed to be at work, and I was supposed to be with clients. The footage showed them embracing, kissing, discussing plans in hushed tones, while sitting on the couch David and I had picked out together for our 10th anniversary. I accessed David's laptop using the password he'd never bothered to change. Our wedding date, combined with my name. His email revealed the full scope of their betrayal, a digital trail of lies and manipulation that stretched back almost a year. The earliest emails between David and Emma were flirtatious but cautious, testing bound, Aries and building intimacy. But within months, they'd evolved into detailed plans for a future that didn't include me. Sarah's life insurance policy is worth $15 million, one email from David read. Combined with her business assets and the inheritance from her parents, we're looking at close to $40 million total. Emma's response was chilling in its casualness. The sooner the better. I'm tired of pretending to care about her boring stories and her need to control everything. Once she's gone, we can finally be together without hiding. They'd researched my daily routines, my health history, my social connections. They knew I took medication for anxiety, that I sometimes forgot to eat when I was stressed about a big project, that I had a family history of heart problems on my mother's side. Most terrifyingly, they'd been in contact with someone called Dr. Marcus Harrison, who appeared to be providing them with information about substances that could mimic natural causes of death. The emails discussed dosages, timing, and methods that would be undetectable in a standard autopsy. The insulin overdose approach is too risky, Dr. Harrison had written in one email. Too many variables, and if she survives, there could be permanent damage that would raise questions. I recommend the potassium chloride method instead. Injected properly, it causes immediate cardiac arrest that appears completely natural, especially in someone with her stress levels and family history. My hands were shaking as I printed out email after email, building a file of evidence that painted a picture of premeditated murder. But I needed more than just digital evidence. I needed to understand how deep this conspiracy went and who else might be involved. I called in sick to work and spent the day following Emma using the tracking app I'd installed on her phone months earlier when she'd asked me to help her find it after claiming it had been stolen. She went to work at the marketing firm as usual, but during her lunch break, she drove to a small medical office in a strip mall on the outskirts of town. I parked across the street and watched through binoculars as she met with a middle-aged man in a white coat who I assumed was Dr. Harrison. They spoke for 20 minutes in his office before Emma left, carrying a small brown paper bag. That evening, Emma came to my house for our usual Sunday dinner, acting perfectly normal as we cooked together and discussed her week. She asked about my health, expressing concern about my recent stomach bug, and suggesting I see a doctor if I continued feeling unwell. "You work too hard, Sarah," she said, stirring the sauce for our pasta dinner. "All that stress isn't good for your heart. You know how Mom died so young from heart problems." The casual way she referenced our mother's death while planning my own murder was breathtakingly cold. This wasn't the sister I'd raised and loved. This was a stranger wearing Emma's face, a predator who'd been living in my home and my heart while plotting my destruction. My phone buzzed with another message from that unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow at Centennial Park near the Parthenon replica. 3 p.m. Come alone. I have information that will save your life." I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing with questions and fears. Who was sending me these messages? How did they know about David and Emma's plan? Could I trust them, or was this another layer of deception designed to manipulate me further? The next afternoon, I arrived at Centennial Park 30 minutes early, choosing a bench with clear sightlines, where I could observe anyone approaching. At exactly 3 p.m., a woman with short blonde hair and intense green eyes walked toward me with the careful gait of someone who'd learned to constantly assess their surroundings for threats. "Sarah Matthews?" she asked softly. I nodded, studying her face. She appeared to be in her early 40s, well-dressed but not flashy, with the kind of understated elegance that suggested good education and refined taste. "My name is Rebecca Patterson," she said, sitting down beside me. "David was my husband before he was yours." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "That's impossible. David told me his first wife died in a car accident 8 years ago. He said her name was Linda, and that losing her nearly destroyed him." Rebecca's laugh was bitter and sad. "David is very good at creating believable stories. Linda Patterson was my legal name after we married, but my maiden name was Rebecca Chen, and I didn't die in a car accident. I faked my own death to escape him before he could murder me." She pulled out a tablet and showed me a collection of documents, photographs, and medical records that told a horrifying story. Rebecca had been David's wife for 4 years, during which time he'd systematically isolated her from friends and family, controlled her finances, and gradually poisoned her with insulin injections that he claimed were vitamins. "I'm not diabetic," Rebecca explained. "But David convinced me I was developing the conditine and needed daily medication. I trusted him completely. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely concerned about my health. But I was actually getting sicker and sicker as he slowly killed me with insulin overdoses." The medical records showed repeated hospitalizations for unexplained hypoglycemic episodes, each one more severe than the last. Doctors had been baffled by Rebecca's conditine, unable to find an underlying cause for her body's inability to regulate blood sugar. "How did you figure it out?" I asked. "My sister is a nurse. When I told her about my symptoms and treatment, she immediately knew something was wrong. She helped me get independent blood tests that showed massive amounts of external insulin in my system. That's when I realized David was poisoning me." Rebecca showed me photographs from her time with David. Wedding pictures, vacation shots, family gatherings, where they looked like the perfect couple. But she also showed me pictures of the bruises he'd left on her arms from the injection sites, the medical bills from her frequent hospitalizations, and the legal documents she'd prepared in secret while planning her escape. "Faking my death was the only way to get away from him safely," she continued. "I had a friend who worked at the medical examiner's office help me stage a car accident. David thought I was dead, so he stopped looking for me. I've been living under a different name in Florida ever since, working as a medical researcher and trying to build evidence against him." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I tried. But David is very good at covering his tracks, and he has connections in law enforcement through his business dealings. Without a body or definitive proof of attempted murder, they couldn't build a case. So I've been waiting and watching, hoping he'd eventually make a mistake or find another victim who could help bring him down." Rebecca's expression grew more intense. "When I saw the marriage announcement in the newspaper's social section and recognized your sister's name, I started investigating. What I found terrified me. David isn't just planning to kill you, Sarah. He's done this before multiple times." She showed me newspaper clippings and death certificates for 3 other women who'd been married to David Patterson over the past 15 years. Margaret Chen, no relation to Rebecca, despite the same last name, who died in a car accident after her brakes failed. Jennifer Walsh, who died of a heart attack at age 32 despite having no history of heart problems. And Linda Morrison, who died of complications from diabetes despite never being diagnosed with the condition. David changes his name slightly each time, Rebecca explained. David Patterson, David Patterson, David Peterson. He moves to a new city, creates a new identity, and finds a new victim. The pattern is always the same. He targets successful women with significant assets, marries them quickly, and kills them within 2 to 3 years to inherit their wealth. But Emma isn't married to him yet. She's my sister, not his wife. That's the new wrinkle in his approach. Instead of targeting you directly, he's using Emma to get close to you and your assets. Think about it. As your only surviving family member, Emma would inherit everything if you died. And as her husband David would control that inheritance. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. David had spent months, maybe years, grooming Emma and turning her against me. He'd convinced her that I was standing in the way of their happiness, that my death would free them to be together while making them both wealthy beyond their dreams. There's something else you need to know, Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Emma isn't just David's accomplice. She's his student. He's been training her to become like him, a serial killer who targets family members for financial gain. She showed me surveillance photos of Emma meeting with other people I didn't recognize, exchanging envelopes and documents in parking lots and coffee shops around Nashville. We believe she's already practicing on smaller targets, Rebecca continued. Elderly clients at her marketing firm, distant relatives with inheritance potential. David is teaching her to be patient, to build relationships over months or years before striking. Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? Rebecca's eyes hardened with determination. I want justice for all the women David has killed, and I want to stop Emma before she becomes a full-fledged serial killer like him. But most importantly, I want to save your life. Rebecca's plan was elaborate and dangerous, but it was also our only chance to gather enough evidence to put both David and Emma in prison for life. We need to let them think their plan is working, she explained as we sat in her rental car outside a coffee shop in downtown Nashville. If we confront them directly or go to the police now, they'll disappear and start over somewhere else with new identities. But if we can catch them in the act of attempting to murder you, we'll have definitive proof of their crimes. The first step was to fake my death convincingly enough to fool David and Emma, but not so convincingly that I actually died in the process. Rebecca had connections in the medical community through her research work, including a forensic pathologist named Dr. Elena Martinez, who'd been investigating suspicious deaths in the Southeast for years. Dr. Martinez has been tracking David's pattern across multiple states, Rebecca explained. She's the one who first identified the connection between the various women who died under suspicious circumstances after marrying men with similar names and profiles. We met with Dr. Martinez at her private lab, a sterile facility filled with high-tech equipment and walls lined with forensic textbooks and case files. She was a stern woman in her 50s, with graying hair and intense dark eyes that seemed to see through everything. The substance David is planning to use is called succinylcholine. Dr. Martinez explained, showing us a vial of clear liquid. It's a paralytic agent used in surgery, but in large doses, it causes respiratory failure that mimics natural cardiac arrest. It's nearly undetectable in standard toxicology tests because it breaks down rapidly in the body. How do you know that's what he's planning to use? Because we intercepted his communications with Dr. Harrison, she replied, pulling up encrypted messages on her computer. Harrison isn't actually a licensed physician. He's a MER anesthesiologist who lost his license for selling controlled substances, but he still has access to medical supplies through black market connections. Dr. Martinez showed us a detailed plan that would allow me to fake my death while actually remaining alive. The key was a drug called propofol, the same anesthetic used in surgical procedures, which would slow my heart rate and breathing to nearly undetectable levels while keeping me alive. You'll appear dead for approximately 6 hours, she explained. Your pulse will be so weak that only the most sophisticated equipment could detect it, and your breathing will be so shallow that even trained medical professionals won't notice it. During that time, we'll document everything David and Emma do and say gathering evidence of their crimes. What if something goes wrong? What if the dosage is incorrect or my body reacts badly? I'll be monitoring you the entire time through remote sensors, Dr. Martinez assured me. The moment your vital signs indicate any real danger, we'll intervene and administer the reversal agent. Rebecca added, and I'll be watching David and Emma through hidden cameras and audio devices we'll plant in your house. We need to record them confessing to the murders and discussing their plans for disposing of your body and accessing your assets. The plan was terrifying but necessary. If we could gather enough evidence of David's pattern of killing wives and Emma's participation in planning my murder, we could ensure they both received life sentences and prevent them from claiming any more victims. Over the next week, we carefully orchestrated the circumstances that would allow our plan to succeed. Rebecca used her medical connections to have Dr. Martinez appointed as a consulting pathologist for the Davidson County Medical Examiner's Office, giving her the authority to handle my death officially. I quietly transferred most of my liquid assets to accounts that David and Emma couldn't access, while leaving enough money in our joint accounts to make their financial motive appear realistic. I also created a new will that left everything to a charitable foundation rather than to Emma, though I made sure they wouldn't discover this change until after my death. Meanwhile, Rebecca and Dr. Martinez installed a network of hidden cameras and microphones throughout my house, focusing on areas where David and Emma were likely to have private conversations. They also planted tracking devices on both of their phones and cars, ensuring we could monitor their movements at all times. On Friday evening, I took the propofol injection that Dr. Martinez had prepared. The last thing I remember was lying down on my bedroom floor, positioning myself where David would find me when he returned from his supposed business trip. When David discovered my unconscious body at 11:30 p.m., his performance was worthy of an Academy Award. He called 911 with just the right mixture of panic and desperation in his voice, administered CPR with convincing technique, and wept convincingly as paramedics worked to revive me. At Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Dr. Martinez officially pronounced me dead from sudden cardiac arrest, citing my stress levels and family history of heart disease as contributing factors. David and Emma wept at my bedside, holding each other as they grieved my untimely passing. But the hidden cameras captured what happened after the medical staff left the room, and they thought they were alone. I can't believe it actually worked. Emma whispered, her tears immediately stopping as she checked to make sure no one was watching. The timing was perfect, David replied, stroking her hair with tender affection. No one will suspect anything. Sudden cardiac arrest in a young woman with her stress levels and family history is completely believable. When can we access the accounts? I'll file the death certificate Monday morning. As your guardian and the executor of her will, I can start the asset transfer process immediately. Her business alone is worth about $15 million plus another $10 million in investment accounts and real estate. What about the insurance policy? $15 million paid directly to me as the beneficiary. Between everything we're looking at, about $40 million total. They spent the next hour discussing their plans for my assets, with casual indifference, as if they were talking about dividing up furniture after a garage sale. They planned to liquidate my business, immediately sell our house and all its contents, and transfer everything to offshore accounts, before disappearing to a country without extradition treaties. But the most chilling part of their conversation was when they discussed their future victims. There's a widow in Knoxville who owns a chain of boutique hotels, Emma said. She's lonely, recently diagnosed with early-stage dementia, and worth about $25 million. I've already made contact through a charity fundraiser. Perfect, David replied. By the time we finish liquidating Sarah's assets, you'll be ready to move on her. We can use the same approach, slow poisoning to create symptoms that match her medical condition, then a final dose that looks like natural progression of the disease. They were already planning their next murder. Over the next 3 days, as preparations for my funeral proceeded, Rebecca and Dr. Martinez continued recording David and Emma's conversations. The evidence they gathered was overwhelming. Detailed discussions of how they'd killed David's previous wives, step-by-step plans for accessing my assets and strategies for avoiding detection by law enforcement. On the day of my funeral, hundreds of people gathered at Westminster Presbyterian Church to pay their respects. I watched from a surveillance van parked across the street as my clients, colleagues, and friends mourned my passing. David and Emma played their roles, perfectly accepting condolences with appropriate grief, while secretly planning to celebrate my death once everyone left. After the service, they returned to our house with several of David's business associates and Emma's co-workers for a traditional post-funeral gathering. But once the guests left, the real David and Emma emerged, Finally, Emma said, kicking off her black heels and pouring herself a glass of my expensive wine. I thought those people would never leave. The hardest part is over, David replied, opening his laptop to begin accessing my accounts. By this time next week, we'll be on a beach in Costa Rica with more money than we ever dreamed of. I still can't believe how easy it was. Sarah was so trusting, so naive. She never suspected anything, even when I was putting the practice doses in her coffee. Practice doses. The insulin and potassium chloride mixtures Dr. Harrison gave me. I wanted to make sure I understood the dosages before we used the final injection. Sarah just thought she was getting sick from stress. They spent the evening going through my personal belongings, deciding what to keep and what to sell. Emma tried on my jewelry, while David appraised my art collection, both of them treating my possessions like spoils of war. But the conversation that sealed their fate came when David called Dr. Harrison to arrange payment for the succinylcholine that had supposedly killed me. The autopsy showed exactly what we expected, David said into his phone, not realizing that every word was being recorded. Sudden cardiac arrest, no suspicious substances detected. Sarah Matthews is officially dead, and her assets are about to become our assets. What about the sister? Dr. Harrison's voice was clearly audible through the speakerphone. Emma performed perfectly. Her acting was completely convincing, and she followed the injection protocol exactly. You've trained her well. She's ready for the next level then, independent operations. Absolutely. We've already identified her next target in Knoxville. A wealthy widow with early dementia who'll be easy to manipulate. Emma can handle that one entirely on her own, while I work on a real estate heiress in Atlanta. Excellent. The network is always looking for new operatives with Emma's skills and background. She could be running her own territory within a few years. The conversation revealed that David and Emma were part of a larger criminal organization that specialized in targeting wealthy individuals for murder and inheritance fraud. Dr. Harry's son was apparently a coordinator who provided technical support and training for killers across the Southeast. On Monday morning, exactly 6 hours after taking the propofol injection, I awakened in Dr. Martinez's private medical facility, feeling groggy but very much alive. Rebecca was sitting beside my bed, showing me video footage of everything David and Emma had said and done since my death. We have enough evidence to put them away for life, she said with satisfaction. Multiple confessions to murder, detailed discussions of their methods, and proof of their involvement in a larger criminal conspiracy. What happens now? Now we spring the trap. The FBI has been briefed on everything we've discovered, and they're ready to make arrests as soon as we give them the signal. But first, we thought you might want to confront them yourself. The idea of facing David and Emma with the truth about their failed plan was terrifying, but also strangely appealing. They'd spent months planning my death, treating me like an obstacle to be eliminated, rather than a human being worthy of love and respect. I wanted them to know that their victim had outsmarted them. Dr. Martinez had prepared a realistic-looking death certificate and autopsy report that would convince David and Emma I was truly dead, at least until I revealed myself. The plan was for me to appear at our house while they were going through my belongings, shocking them into revealing even more incriminating information. At 2 p.m. on Monday, while David and Emma were at the house sorting through my personal items and preparing to list the property for sale, I walked through our front door using my own key. The expressions on their faces when they saw me standing in our foyer, very much alive and carrying a briefcase full of evidence, were worth every moment of terror I'd endured over the past week. Emma dropped the jewelry box she'd been filling with my pieces, sending necklaces and earrings scattering across the hardwood floor. David's face went completely white as he stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Hello, darling," I said to David with cold calm. "How was your business trip to Chicago? I hope the international investors were impressed with your presentation." "Sarah," he stammered, "I thought the doctors said you died of a heart attack." "Did I? How unfortunate. I suppose that means you'll have to find another way to access my $40 million. Emma finally found her voice. "Sarah, what's happening? We buried you on Saturday. We watched them put your body in the ground. You watched them bury an empty casket while I was very much alive and listening to every word you said about murdering me for my money." I replied, setting my briefcase on the coffee table and opening it to reveal the recording equipment inside. Every conversation, every plan, every confession has been recorded and turned over to the FBI. They know about Dr. Harrison, about David's previous wives, about the criminal network you're both part of. And they know about your plans to kill the widow in Knoxville. David lunged toward me, perhaps thinking he could still salvage the situation through violence, but FBI agents were already surrounding the house. Agent Williams entered through the back door with his weapon drawn, followed by a team of federal investigators. David Patterson and Emma Matthews, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, and racketeering. Agent Williams announced, "You have the right to remain silent." In the weeks following their arrest, the full scope of David and Emma's crimes became clear. FBI investigators discovered that they were part of a sophisticated criminal network that had been operating across multiple states for over a decade. David had indeed killed his 3 previous wives, using methods that made their deaths pair, natural or accidental. The insurance payouts and inherited assets from those murders had funded his lifestyle and allowed him to establish new identities in different cities. Emma's background was even more disturbing. She wasn't actually my sister at all, but a trained operative who'd been placed with me through a corrupted foster care system when our parents died. Her real name was Rachel Hoffman, and she'd been groomed from childhood to infiltrate wealthy families and extract their assets through manipulation and murder. The Heritage Foundation, the organization that placed Emma with you, was a front for this criminal network. Agent Williams explained during one of our briefing sessions. They identified orphan children with the right psychological profiles and trained them to be perfect infiltrators. Charming, trustworthy, and completely immoral. How many families have they targeted? We've identified at least 30 cases over the past 15 years. Some of the children placed through Heritage became whistleblowers, who helped us break up the network, but others like Emma became full participants in the crimes. The investigation revealed that Emma had been studying my routines, my relationships, and my financial situation for years, slowly building trust while gathering information that would eventually be used to kill me. She'd been in contact with David long before they'd apparently met through mutual friends, and their entire courtship had been a carefully orchestrated deception. But perhaps most shocking of all was the discovery that Emma had already killed before. The elderly client from her marketing firm, who died of a heart attack the previous year, had actually been poisoned with the same insulin cocktail that David had used on Rebecca. Emma had inherited $50,000 from the woman's will, after convincing her to change it during her phenol weeks of life. She was practicing, Dr. Martinez explained. David was teaching her techniques and testing her psychological readiness to commit murder. The elderly client was essentially a rehearsal for killing you. The trial lasted 6 months and attracted national media attention as prosecutors detailed the extent of the criminal network and the sophisticated methods used to target wealthy victims. David was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and racketeer. Emma faced charges for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and the death of her elderly victim. During the proceedings, Rebecca testified about her experience with David, providing crucial evidence about his patterns and methods. Dr. Martinez explained the medical aspects of the murders, while FBI investigators detailed the structure of the Heritage Foundation and its role in training criminal operatives. The most dramatic moment came when Emma took the stand in her own defense, attempting to portray herself as a victim of psychological manipulation rather than a willing participant in murder. But the recordings of her conversations with David, particularly her casual discussions of targeting the widow in Knoxville, made it clear that she was a calculating predator rather than a naive accomplice. "You spent 12 years living in my home, eating at my table, and calling me sister," I said, during my victim impact statement. "I loved you, protected you, and would have done anything to ensure your happiness. But you saw me only as an obstacle to wealth and a practice target for murder." That level of deception and betrayal goes beyond criminal behavior. It's a fundamental corruption of human connection. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of his 4 wives. Emma received 50 years for conspiracy to commit murder and the death of her elderly victim. Dr. Harrison and 12 other members of the Heritage Foundation network were also convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. But perhaps more importantly, the investigation led to the rescue of dozens of children who were being groomed by the network for future criminal operations. Foster care systems across the Southeast were reformed to prevent similar infiltrations, and new protocols were established to monitor the placement of orphan children with wealthy families. In the months following the trial, I faced the difficult task of rebuilding my life and my sense of trust in other people. 12 years of marriage to a serial killer and 12 years of sisterhood with a trained operative had left me questioning my ability to judge character and form genuine relationships. I sold our Belmead mansion, too many memories of betrayal haunted every room, and moved to a smaller but more secure home in the Hillsborough Village area of Nashville. I kept my interior design business, but restructured it completely, implementing multiple layers of financial oversight and security protocols to prevent future exploitation. Therapy with Dr. Sandra Chen, a specialist in trauma recovery and betrayal trauma, helped me understand that David and Emma's deceptions weren't a reflection of my naivety or poor judgment, but rather evidence of their sophisticated manipulation skills. "You weren't stupid or blind," Dr. Chen assured me during one of our sessions. "You were targeted by professionals who spent years studying how to exploit your specific psychological profile and emotional needs. The fact that you eventually recognized the inconsistencies and took action to protect yourself shows remarkable strength and intuition." Rebecca became an unexpected source of support and friendship, someone who understood the unique trauma of surviving David Patterson's predation. She moved back to Tennessee from Florida and began working with law enforcement agencies to identify and investigate other potential serial killers who target spouses for financial gain. "The hardest part isn't the fear or the anger," Rebecca told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "It's the loneliness. When you discover that your most intimate relationships were lies, it becomes terrifying to trust anyone new." Together, we started the Matthews Patterson Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping other women who'd survived elaborate cons, financial abuse, or domestic violence. We provided financial assistance for legal fees, security measures, and therapy, as well as educational resources to help women recognize the warning signs of predatory behavior. Our first client was Maria Santos, a widow from Memphis whose much younger boyfriend had been slowly poisoning her, while convincing her to change her will in his favor. Thanks to the protocols we'd developed with law enforcement, we were able to intervene before he succeeded in killing her. "How did you know?" Maria asked when we met with her at our foundation offices. "Everyone thought Jake was wonderful. He was so attentive, so caring." "Because we've seen this pattern before," I explained. "Predators like David and Jake follow similar scripts. They isolate you from friends and family, create financial dependence, and use medical emergencies or health scares to explain away symptoms of poisoning." The foundation also worked with foster care agencies to improve screening procedures and prevent criminal networks from infiltrating the system. Emma's case had exposed serious vulnerabilities in how orphaned children were placed with families, and we were determined to ensure that no other child would be groomed for criminal activity. 6 months after the trial, Agent Williams contacted me with disturbing news. The Heritage Foundation case had led to a much larger investigation that spanned multiple federal agencies and international law enforcement organizations. "We've identified at least 200 victims across North America," he explained during a meeting at the FBI field office. The network was much more sophisticated than we initially realized, with connections to human trafficking operations, identity theft rings, and offshore money laundering schemes. The investigation had revealed that children weren't just being trained to infiltrate wealthy families. They were also being sold to criminal organizations for use in various illegal activities. Some became pickpockets and shoplifters. Others were forced into prostitution, and the most psychologically malleable ones, like Emma, were groomed to become killers. Emma's psychological profile showed all the markers of severe childhood trauma and conditioning. Dr. Martinez explained when I asked about her background. She was essentially programmed from age 10 to view human relationships as transactional and to suppress male emotional responses like empathy and guilt. Does that excuse what she did? Not at all. But it explains how someone could live with you for 12 years while planning your murder. To Emma, you weren't a sister or even a human being with feelings. You were simply a resource to be exploited. The revelation made Emma's betrayal somehow both more understandable and more horrifying. She hadn't just chosen to betray me for money. She'd been systematically destroyed as a person and rebuilt as a predator. But understanding her background didn't diminish my determination to see justice done. If anything, it reinforced my commitment to preventing other children from suffering the same fate. As the federal investigation expanded, we learned that the Heritage Foundation was just one node in an international network that specialized in exploiting vulnerable children for criminal purposes. Similar organizations operated in Canada, Mexico, and several European countries, all coordinated by a central command structure that law enforcement was still working to dismantle. Dr. Harrison, it turned out, had been more than just a supplier of drugs and medical advice. He was a key coordinator who matched trained operatives like Emma with targets like David, who needed assistance with their criminal operations. The network operated like a sophisticated employment agency for killers and con artists. They kept detailed psychological profiles on all their operatives. Agent Williams showed me files seized from Dr. Harrison's computers. Emma's file indicates she was considered one of their most successful products, completely lacking in normal emotional attachments, and highly skilled at long-term deception. Emma's file contained surveillance photos of me dating back 5 years before our parents' death, along with detailed financial information and psychological assessments of my likely responses to various manipulation techniques. The network had been watching me long before they'd arranged for Emma to be placed in my custody. They knew our parents were going to die, I asked, horrified by the implications. We're still investigating that aspect of the case, Agent Williams replied carefully. But we have evidence that the network sometimes arranged for accidents to befall parents when they wanted to place an operative with specific targets. The possibility that our parents' car crash hadn't been accidental was almost too much to process. Had they been murdered simply to give Emma access to my family's wealth? The investigation was ongoing, but the evidence was pointing in that direction. 3 months into her prison sentence, Emma requested a meeting with me. Against the advice of my lawyers and therapist, I agreed to see her at the Tennessee Prison for Women in Nashville. She looked smaller in her orange prison uniform, her hair pulled back severely, and her face free of the makeup she'd always worn so carefully. But her eyes still held the same calculating intelligence that had allowed her to deceive me for so many years. "I suppose you want an apology," she said, when I sat down across from her in the visiting room. "I want the truth," I replied. "About our parents, about how long you've been planning this, about whether any part of our relationship was real." Emma was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with the same analytical expression I'd seen her use when working on marketing campaigns. "Our parents' car accident wasn't an accident," she finally said. "Dr. Harrison arranged it because the network needed me to be placed with your family specifically. They'd been monitoring your financial growth and identified you as a high-value target." The words hit me like physical blows, but I forced myself to remain calm. "How long have you been planning to kill me?" "Since I was 16. That's when Dr. Harrison first explained my real purpose and began training me in advanced manipulation techniques. Everything after that, my college years, my career, my relationships, was all preparation for eventually extracting your assets. Did you ever care about me at all? Even a little?" Emma's expression didn't change. "I was conditioned not to form genuine emotional attachments. Caring about targets makes the work more difficult. But if it helps you find closure, I can say that living with you was pleasant. You were kinder than most of the training scenarios prepared me for." The clinical way she discussed our 12-year relationship was more devastating than outright hatred would have been. To Emma, I'd never been a person at all, just a particularly comfortable assignment. "David found you through the network. Dr. Harrison connected us 2 years ago when David's previous approach wasn't working fast enough. You were too healthy and too careful for his usual methods to be effective. He needed someone with long-term access to your daily routine and your trust. The elderly woman you killed at your marketing firm, was that part of the plan too?" "Practice," Emma said simply. "Dr. Harrison wanted me to experience the full process before attempting something as complex as your murder. The woman had no family, so her death wouldn't be investigated thoroughly." Emma answered my questions with the same matter-of-fact tone she'd once used to discuss grocery shopping or weekend plans. There was no remorse, no recognition that she'd destroyed multiple lives, no acknowledgement that her actions had caused immeasurable pain. "Is there anything else you need to know?" she asked as our time ended. "Why are you telling me this now? What do you gain from it?" "Nothing," she replied. "But the network is finished, and my usefulness to them is over. There's no reason to maintain the deceptions anymore." As I left the prison, I realized that Emma's complete lack of remorse was actually a gift. It eliminated any lingering doubt about whether she'd been a victim herself or whether some part of our relationship had been genuine. She was exactly what she appeared to be: a predator who'd worn my sister's face for 12 years while planning my destruction. Recovery from that level of betrayal and deception was a long, difficult process that required me to rebuild my entire understanding of trust, family, and human relationships. Dr. Chen helped me work through the complex grief of losing not just a husband and sister, but the entire history I'd believed we shared. "You're not just mourning their betrayal," she explained during one of our sessions. "You're mourning the loss of your own past. Every memory you have of Emma, every moment you thought you shared, has been retroactively contaminated by the knowledge of her true intentions." The financial and legal aspects of recovery were equally complex. David's conviction meant that all assets he'd obtained through fraud or inheritance from his murdered wives had to be returned to their families or donated to victim assistance programs. Emma's conviction resulted in the forfeiture of everything she'd inherited from me, including the trust fund our parents had established. But more challenging was learning to trust my own judgment again. If I'd been so completely deceived by the two people closest to me, how could I rely on my ability to assess other people's character and intentions? The fact that you eventually recognized the inconsistencies and took action shows that your instincts are actually quite good, Dr. Chen reminded me repeatedly. David and Emma were professionals who'd spent years perfecting their deception techniques. The average person would never have detected their lies or been able to respond as effectively as you did. Slowly, I began to rebuild my social connections, starting with colleagues and clients who'd known me for years and had no financial motivation to deceive me. Rebecca's friendship was particularly valuable because she understood the specific trauma of surviving David's predation. I also began dating again very cautiously and with extensive background checks on anyone I considered seeing more than once. It was exhausting to be so suspicious of everyone's motives, but it was necessary for my peace of mind. 2 years after the trial, I met Thomas Bradley, a fellow entrepreneur who owned a successful architectural firm in Atlanta. We were introduced by mutual business contacts at a conference on sustainable design, and I was immediately struck by his genuine passion for his work and his straightforward communication style. Unlike David, who'd always been charming and smooth in his interactions, Thomas was sometimes awkward and always honest. He didn't try to impress me with expensive gifts or elaborate romantic gestures. Instead, he shared his enthusiasm for green building techniques and asked thoughtful questions about my own design philosophy. Our relationship developed slowly with extensive conversations about our backgrounds, our goals, and our previous relationships. I was upfront about my experience with David and Emma, and Thomas was understanding about my need for transparency and verification. "I can't imagine what that must have been like," he said when I told him the full story. "But I admire how you handled it. Most people would have been completely destroyed by that level of betrayal." Thomas submitted to background checks without complaint, introduced me to his family and longtime friends, and provided financial statements that showed he was financially stable and had no need to target me for my assets. More importantly, he demonstrated consistency between his public and private personas that convinced me he was genuinely who he claimed to be. When he proposed 18 months later, I said yes, but only after conducting one final thorough investigation of his background that included interviews with his ex-girlfriend's business partners and college roommates. The private investigator I hired found nothing suspicious, and everyone I spoke with described Thomas as honest, hardworking, and emotionally stable. Our wedding was small and private, with extensive security measures and prenuptial agreements that protected both of our assets. But despite the precautions, it was also joyful, a celebration of finding genuine love after surviving such devastating deception. 5 years after David and Emma's conviction, the Matthews Patterson Foundation had helped more than 300 victims of elaborate cons and domestic violence. We'd also worked with law enforcement agencies to identify and shut down 12 other criminal networks that exploited vulnerable children for illegal activities. The Foundation's educational programs had reached thousands of people through workshops, online resources, and partnerships with women's organizations. We taught people how to recognize the warning signs of predatory behavior, how to protect their assets from manipulation, and how to safely extract themselves from dangerous relationships. The most important thing is to trust your instincts, I told audiences at our educational seminars. If something feels wrong about a relationship or situation, investigate further, rather than dismissing your concerns. Predators count on their victims' desire to be trusting and polite. We also worked with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies to train investigators in recognizing the patterns associated with inheritance fraud and familial predation. The techniques David and Emma had used were being replicated by other criminals, and education was the best defense against them. But perhaps our most important work was with the foster care system, helping to implement new screening procedures and monitoring protocols that would prevent criminal networks from infiltrating the placement process. Emma's case had exposed serious vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed to protect other vulnerable children. 7 years after her conviction, Emma contacted me again from prison. This time, she claimed to have information that could help law enforcement shut down remaining elements of the Heritage Foundation network. There are still operatives out there, she wrote in her letter. Children who were trained like I was but haven't been activated yet. They're living normal lives, waiting for instructions that may never come, now that the leadership has been arrested. Against my better judgment, I agreed to another meeting. Emma looked older now, more fragile, with gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that hadn't been there during our previous encounter. I've been in therapy, she said when I sat down across from her. Learning about the conditioning I underwent and trying to understand why I became what I became. And what have you learned? That I was systematically destroyed as a person and rebuilt as a weapon. But also that I made choices along the way that I could have made differently. Even with all the conditioning, I still had moments of doubt. Moments when I could have chosen to protect you instead of betraying you. It was the closest thing to remorse I'd ever heard from her. But I wasn't sure whether to believe it or whether it was just another manipulation technique. The information you mentioned, what is it? Emma pulled out a hand-drawn map and several pages of notes. Locations of safe houses, contact protocols, training facilities that the FBI hasn't found yet. And names. Dozens of children who were placed with families, but haven't completed their assignments yet. Why give me this now? Because I want the cycle to stop. I want other children to have the chance I never had. To grow up as real people instead of programmed killers. I took the information and immediately turned it over to Agent Williams. The leads Emma provided resulted in the rescue of 23 children from ongoing criminal operations and the arrest of 15 more network coordinators across North America. But I never saw Emma again. She died in prison 6 months later from a brain aneurysm. Taking with her any remaining secrets about the network's operations and any possibility of genuine redemption. As I write this, 10 years have passed since that night when I watched David and Emma exchange wedding vows while believing I was safely asleep at home. The terror and betrayal of that period feel distant now, like memories from someone else's life. Thomas and I have been married for 3 years, and we have a daughter named Hope, who will grow up knowing the truth about human nature. That people are capable of both tremendous love and devastating cruelty, and that wisdom lies in learning to tell the difference. I still run my interior design business, though I've expanded it to include security consulting for high net worth individuals who want to protect themselves from the kind of predation I experienced. The work is rewarding because it helps people create beautiful spaces that are also safe spaces. The Matthews Patterson Foundation continues to grow, now operating in 12 states, with a staff of 45 people who are dedicated to helping victims of elaborate cons and domestic violence. Rebecca serves as our executive director, and her experience surviving David's predation makes her uniquely qualified to understand and help other victims. The most important lessons I learned: 1. Trust your instincts above all else. Your subconscious mind often recognizes danger before your conscious mind does. If something feels wrong about a person or situation, investigate, rather than dismissing your concerns as paranoia. 2. Financial independence is personal safety. Maintain assets that cannot be accessed by anyone else, including spouses and family members. Have your own bank accounts, credit cards, and emergency funds that predators cannot control or eliminate. 3. Verify everything important. Love does not require blind trust. Independent verification of major claims about background, employment, health, and financial status is not suspicious. It's sensible. 4. Document suspicious behavior. Keep records of inconsistent stories, unexplained absences, and other red flags. What seems like minor inconsistencies may later prove to be evidence of major deception. 5. Build support networks. Outside your family, having allies who are not financially or emotionally dependent on your primary relationships provides perspective and assistance when those relationships become dangerous. 6. Professional help can save your life. Law enforcement, medical professionals, financial advisors, and security experts have tools and knowledge that can make the difference between survival and becoming a victim. 7. Predators. Follow patterns, understanding how sophisticated predators operate. Their selection criteria, grooming techniques, and extraction methods can help you recognize and avoid similar situations. 8. Recovery requires professional support. The psychological trauma of elaborate betrayal cannot be processed alone. Therapy with specialists who understand complex trauma is essential for genuine healing. 9. Helping others helps yourself. Using your experience to protect other potential victims provides meaning and purpose that transforms trauma into strength. 10. Real love feels. Different, authentic relationships develop gradually and transparently without excessive charm manipulation or attempts to isolate you from other people who care about you. Final thoughts on justice and healing. David Patterson died in prison 3 years ago, killed by another inmate who'd learned about his crimes against women. I felt no satisfaction in his death. By then, I'd moved beyond wanting revenge and was focused on prevention and healing. Emma's death was more complicated emotionally. Despite everything she'd done, part of me still remembered the frightened 14-year-old girl who'd come to live with me after our parents died. That girl had been real, even if everything that came after was constructed for criminal purposes. The Heritage Foundation network has been largely dismantled, though law enforcement believes that similar organizations may still operate in other regions. The FBI estimates that our case led to the rescue of more than 200 children and the prevention of dozens of murders. But the most meaningful outcome has been the transformation of my own life, from victim to survivor to advocate. The experience taught me that humans are capable of both devastating evil and extraordinary resilience, and that the choice between them often comes down to whether we allow our worst experiences to destroy us or to make us stronger. I survived because I learned to trust my instincts, document my concerns, and ask for help when I needed it. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones planning to destroy you, but that real love and genuine relationships do exist for those wise enough to recognize the difference. Most importantly, I learned that even after the most devastating betrayal, it's possible to build a new life that's better than the old one. A life based on truth, instead of lies, on earned trust, instead of blind faith, and on the knowledge that you have the strength to survive whatever challenges come your way. The woman who trusted blindly is gone forever. In her place is someone who knows the difference between love and manipulation, between family and fraud, between safety and the illusion of safety. And that knowledge, painful as it was to acquire, has become the foundation for a life of genuine happiness and authentic connection. Because in the end, the truth, no matter how painful, will always set you free. The end.